Good evening. Welcome. Welcome to the Columbia University Amelia Bundles Community Scholars Lecture, Carving Architecture and Careers with the Pellettieri Stone Carvers Academy, with Bundles scholar Chris Pellettieri. I'm George Calderaro with the School of Professional Studies Auditing and Community Programs. We are coming to you from the Forum on Columbia's Manhattanville campus for those of you who are joining us online. New Yorkers have the amazing good fortune to live in an environment rich in the products of the stone carving tradition. Not only majestic landmarks in the immediate vicinity, like Low Library at Columbia's Morningside campus, Grant's Tomb, and the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, but also countless apartment buildings, row houses, and institutions in all 5 boroughs that display the skill, creativity, passion, and energy of stone carvers from a bygone era through today. Chris Pellettieri is a professional stone carver and the founder and executive director of the Pellettieri Stone Carvers Academy, a nonprofit which offers training for all ages in the traditional methods of stone carving. He's truly a community member, having grown up in Morningside Heights. After attending the St. John the Divine Cathedral School and Stuyvesant High School, Chris found his way to the Cathedral Stone Yard, where he trained in stone carving. In the late 1980s, he was one of the last people to learn traditional stone carving in an apprenticeship program at the Cathedral. In addition to his training at Cathedral Stoneworks and Artida Atelier, he has a Bachelor of Arts in Mathematics from NYU. Following Chris's lecture, he will take questions from you in the live audience using a microphone that I'll walk around. Just raise your hand and I'll bring it over so we can catch your question on the web stream. If you're online, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, not the chat, at any time. The Q&A will be followed by a reception in the upper lobby, and a recording of this discussion will be available to view and share on this event's page where you registered on the SBS website next week. The Bundles Community Scholars Lectures and programs are presented and administered by the Columbia School of Professional Studies and the Office of Government and Community Affairs. The Scholars Program was created to enable independent scholars in the community to pursue their academic aspirations through access to Columbia courses and resources. This lecture series was created to provide a forum for scholars to share their work and research. Finally, before I turn the mic over to Chris, I'd like to thank him, as well as our partners in the Office of Government and Community Affairs, the Forum, and my colleagues at SBS, as well as all of you for joining us here in person and online. Now, please help me welcome Chris Pellettieri.
Thank you so much for coming here. I really appreciate you taking your free time to hear what I have to say. So, yes, as George said, I'm from the neighborhood. I grew up just like 2 subway stops downtown. Currently living just like 1 subway stop downtown. When I would rent a car, I used to fill up with gas right here on the spot where this building is. And we used to eat, when I was a kid, we used to eat Chinese food at a restaurant on Broadway. So this really, like, my home turf. But that alone does not entitle me to stand at this podium. No, it's the Bundle Scholar Program that gave me the privilege to be here, and that's a really wonderful thing that Columbia does to help neighborhood people who have a mission to achieve their mission by allowing them to audit classes and giving them access to the resources like George. George is one of the greatest resources we have at Columbia that I've discovered. So what is my project? What is the thing that I was striving to do that I was able to harness Columbia's assistance to do? I'll go into my whole life story later, but the pertinent part is I created a Stone Carvers Academy about 7 years ago. I created this organization to help preserve the dying craft of stone carving, to keep it alive and to share it with other people. But of course, not of course, but I had been a stone carver for all those years, for 3 decades, and I knew nothing about managing nonprofits, so things weren't going so well. So that's why I applied to be a bundle scholar, and I was allowed to take courses, audit courses, with nonprofit geniuses like John Hicks and Gary Bagley and David Stone. So that's been my privilege, and that's why I'm here today at the podium. So why is it important? Why did I establish this organization? What's the big deal about stone carving? That's a question I really hope to answer tonight and to shed some light on. And it might not be the thing that you probably think that I might say. And to help get that discussion started, I wanted to share a quick, like a 90-second video with you. Now this is like a high-tech, modern, robotic stone carving machine. It's obvious, it looks like it's washing the stone, but actually those jets of water are cooling or somehow assisting the motorized bit that's shaping the stone. The instructions that coming into the machine are coming from a computer which is either scanned like a prototype that somebody made out of clay, or maybe it's an existing stone carving, or maybe the designer of the sculpture actually just designed it on a screen and it never even had a 3D aspect before it came to life this way, if you want to call it that. Now the idea to show this to you came to me when I saw a video like this on Instagram. And of course, all the comments after the video were about, oh, it's not a work of art. It was made by a machine. It's got no soul. It's like it's dead, and poo on that. You know, get rid of that piece of junk. I can see that, but that's not the reason why I established the Stone Carvers Academy. I would like to bring back human-guided craftsmanship, but the idea of like somehow battling technology and replacing it with the old-fashioned way is like fantasy. It's not going to happen. And the whole idea of that focuses too much on the product. It focuses too much on what you get from the end product of a stone carver's craft. So it's not the product. That's not why I established the organization. Really, the reason I established the organization has more to do with the experience and what you get out of the activity of carving stone. That's the thing that got me excited more about doing it myself when I started 30 years ago. And that's when I work with young people, that's what I try to instill in them. It's more about the experience. So what do I mean about the experience? I love to use metaphors when I teach, and I'll hit you with one of my favorite metaphors now. The world's full of animals, right? Where human beings are just one animal out of millions of different animals, and each animal has its own special like superpowers, its own special attributes. Like, it's easy to imagine like a dolphin. What are the dolphin's special attributes, its superpowers? It can do amazing like acrobatics in the water, right? You can see them do tricks if you go to those theme parks. They're very intelligent, so they can be trained to do like sophisticated things. They have language. But try to imagine if a dolphin had been raised by manatees. That poor dolphin wouldn't know anything about its superpower, because the manatees just kind of hang there in the water. I'm sure they have superpowers. I don't really know enough about them to say what they are. But if a dolphin was raised by manatees, it wouldn't be in touch with those awesome things that they do. To me, that's like what human beings are experiencing today in this like high-tech world. kids growing up, they don't know about what I consider to be the basic and special attributes of human beings, which are like, we have this amazing intelligence and communication and the intellectual attributes, but we also have, the very dexterity in our hands, and we have ability to use tools, which is coming from these millions of, thousands of, hundreds of thousands of years of evolution or creation, whichever way you want to look at it. Our attributes are tool use and physical, not just the intellectual. But today, it's all about the intellectual, at least what I'm seeing. It's all about sedentary, it's all about screen-based stuff and information-based and memorization. Those are the keys to success, it seems like, in school and in most occupations. And there's people who work with their bodies, but a lot of times they don't have the ability to use their brains at the same time. So it's a separation. Either you're a brain worker, and this is the vast majority, you're a brain worker who doesn't use your body, or you're a physical worker who doesn't use your brain. And that, to me, is a very unhealthy situation. So that is the best I can do to describe why I started the Stone Carvers Academy. More on that later. But now I'm going to launch into my story. See, I'm trying to up my oratory game. That's like, I do my story a lot, but I don't get into this like, wow, these are hard concepts. I don't know if I can get it across. Can I get it across? So we'll go back to what I'm more comfortable with, my story. The earliest moments of my story. Wah! Yeah. That's me and my mom, 5 minutes after I was born, or maybe less. My dad is a photographer, so you can see why he got such great photographs. My brother and I, we grew up right there on 108th and Broadway. And I guess geography, if you think about it, geography determines so much about the path that we have in life. So I grew up 5 minutes from the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, which, lots of people grow up 5 minutes from the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. They don't all become stone carvers. In fact, as far as I know, very few. But it meant a lot to me. And because my mom got the crazy idea to put us in school at the Cathedral School, and here's me in the choir at the Cathedral. Don't ask me to sing. So as I was a student at the Cathedral School from 1st through 8th grade, I guess when I was about 12 years old, that's when Dean Morton resumed construction on the cathedral. There hadn't been anything happening construction-wise for about 35 years. More on that later. But I knew about it. I was aware of it. That's the main thing. I was just a kid. I wasn't that interested in it, but I knew about it. Later on, I went to Stuyvesant High School. It's a great school. Not much handcrafts. A lot of intellectual stuff, a lot of competition, a lot of like high level, like all these Nobel Prize winners went there. I wanted to make my parents proud, so I was a good student. I put my heart into it. But even at that age, I was starting to burn out. I was like, okay, this is enough with the homework and testing. But I didn't know any better, so I went to college anyway. I graduated from NYU, so I've been here. I never even left. I never lived anywhere else. I commuted. Okay, so like I said, I was burning out in high school. So like after college, I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta get something that gets me excited to get up in the morning. I don't know what it's gonna be. It's kind of a crisis. Like, I feel sorry for people. I feel sorry for young people leaving school. Some of them have a real laser focus. They know what they want to do. But a lot of people are like, I have to decide what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life. Our kids are in that situation. Noah, hi Noah. He's about to graduate, and I know there's a lot of pressure on people at that age. What am I going to do? What's my path for the rest of my life? Well, take heart. I didn't know what my path was either. I just said, let me try something. So that's right around the time I met Amy. That's another, so there was a crisis, but there was also some good stuff happening. My wife, Amy. This is us sledding in Riverside Park. So in this weird condition of like, what am I going to do? I knew about the cathedral, I knew about the stone yard, but I was only just beginning to discover that I liked working with tools, because I did a little construction just to stay busy and earn some money and find something to do. I discovered I liked working with tools. I liked making things and working with materials, but the modern construction crafts were like, I don't know, they just had me unloading trucks and sweeping up. But the modern construction is geared more towards minimal training, getting people productive like as fast as possible, so you're more assembling parts that come in to the site on a truck rather than here's a chunk of a tree and you transform it into something, you know, it's not like that. And I wanted that. That's what I wanted. So as I was mentioning before, this great guy is Dean James Parks Morton, and he was in control of the cathedral, and he had been trained as an architect before he became a man of God. And I think that was probably a big part of why he came up with this really outside-the-box idea to resume construction on the cathedral. But as soon as he made that decision, he realized, wait a minute, the whole industry, the whole stone carving industry has withered up since 1942 when we were building last. And there's nobody ready to jump into a job like this. We have to get people from Europe who know this craft and have them train local people, like these guys. I'm going to show you a bunch of pictures, and I want to acknowledge my friend Robert because he took a lot of them. I don't know if you took this one, Robert, but he's an awesome photographer, and he documented a lot of what happened during those years, mostly before I came on. So I don't know. That was a genius idea from my point of view. I don't know if he had all the same motivations that I do because he wasn't a stone carver, but Dean Morton really he hit a home run with that, and it was a sensation. The neighborhood loved it. It was on the news all the time and on TV, people being interviewed. It was just a sensation. It's something that struck a chord. It resonated with people. And I just realized this today, but there were people then, I was just a kid, but there were people then my age who probably were aware of the stone carving in when they'd stopped. I never thought about that before, but yeah, I guess it hadn't been that long that there were still people around. So I'm going to show you a few pictures. We don't need to like dwell, I'm not going to narrate them, but just like, wow, this happened. I think this is about 1979, 1980, 1985 maybe. Yeah, it's okay to ask, to shout out if 85? So here's the first one with me in it. I didn't start at the Stone Yard until 1989. This is one of my most, I guess, proud achievements. And it wasn't even for the cathedral. It was they were starting to take on outside jobs. It had gone through a restructuring. This was for the Jewish Museum, 92nd Street and 5th Avenue. These are some of my teachers that I'm standing with. And yeah, it was just for me, it was a revelation. Because like I said, I was not expecting to find something that would be terribly exciting. I wasn't expecting to find something to do that I'd be good at, that I'd be stimulated and fulfilled, and all those wonderful adjectives or verbs. Okay, now the crisis comes back because the cathedral started investing and changing their philosophy to embrace mechanization. I left because the whole point for me was this excitement I was getting from the handcraft, and they were going in another direction. And since I was still relatively low on the, rankings of skill, my job changed from doing this thing that was really exciting to me to like sanding the marks off of the pieces that the robot had shaped, which is like really not fun. And it seemed like that was the direction. It wasn't going to change. They invested in these machines, so that was. So why am I showing you this building? Because my first job as a self-employed freelance stone carver was in this building right across the street from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's one of those old like robber baron mansions, and the same family owned it who had lived in it since it was built. And They were doing a renovation inside, and they let me work in the basement, and I carved like fireplace mantles like this one, and stairway railings, and a lot of other elements and features of the building. That was a great time. I was like, phew, I found a way to keep doing this. I thought it was going to be another crisis, like, I found what I want to do, now what happens? But I did find a way to do it. And I'll go through a few more slides of things that I did during that period, during that 20-year period. And I was actually, after I left that building, I was able to go back to the cathedral because the whole stone business, the whole stone workshop left. They went out of business. They closed it. A couple of years after I left, they closed it. So I was able, since I still had some connections with the people who managed the church, they allowed me to go back and use the space as an artist in residence. This is a monument for the spirit of St. Louis and Charles Lindbergh's achievement, his historic flight. This is a wall fountain in the backyard of a townhouse on the Upper East Side. I did the whole thing. I was trained not only to do flat surfaces and stone masonry, which is geometric forms for architecture. I was also trained to do the capitals, these at the top of the pilaster capitals, and these imaginative faces that spout the water. Okay, so around this time, I became a dad. Amy and I started having kids. We have 2. Of course, they're not babies like, the picture is, I skipped a few years showing you this picture, but it's my favorite picture, Noah and Louisa. Hi, guys. Here's a nice fountain that I made for an estate, I guess, with frogs and turtles and things. Here's a green man sculpture. That's one of these motifs that's been kicked around for centuries of a face that's composed of leaves. My vision was to challenge myself as much as possible because being trained was like a wonderland. Having people there that were really skilled, that could share their skills with me, that was like, you can't beat that. But once I left that, I had to find some way to keep learning. So I would try to take jobs, and then if they said, well, we'd like a fountain, we'd like a wall fountain, then I'd go nuts and I'd do something like really, not only to build up my portfolio, but also to keep building my skills. This is like a relief sculpture based on the Aesop's fable of the lion and the mouse. And I've also had the privilege of working in some really amazing, like New York City landmarks, like the Temple Emmanuel, where I do inscriptions on a regular basis for their donors' wall. So this is my most prestigious job to date, which is a gateway, like an arch, at Marist College in Poughkeepsie. These foxes, these vertical panels, that's their like heraldic symbol, the fox, just like Columbia has their lion. And the piece that I'm working on is like portraits of Hudson Valley, historical heroes. By the way, that's my workspace at the cathedral. It was like, 8 times bigger than this space with a 10-ton hoist that I could lift up stones just by pushing a button. I was so spoiled. I wish I was still working there, but I understand their decision. This is that Marist archway all assembled, all put together. This is one of those portraits I talked about with the Hudson Valley heroes. Okay, so brace yourself. The next picture is a sad one. This is the stone yard. Yeah, this is where I learned. This is where I had as a workspace for 2 decades after I learned. So like I keep coming up on these crises in my life relating to stone carving. So this was a hard time because the cathedral had been struggling all these years to maintain their finances and to stay in the black, and they'd always been pursuing a way of getting income off of the space, and they finally found a partner to develop that yard. So this is the stone yard, the shed just about before it was about to be taken to the landfill. But it's not the end of the world, right? I found a way to turn lemons into lemonade. I found another place to work, of course, but I also took a deviation in my path which I wouldn't have been able to do if I'd stayed at the Cathedral, because I didn't have total control over the space. I wasn't like encouraged to have other people in there and teach other people. So after I got my own space that I had a, lease, and I was the, owner of it, I was able to do that. And I started this nonprofit organization, the Pellettieri Stone Carvers Academy, with the help of some of my past clients who were very generous, and they donated money to enable it to happen. This is the first cohort of trainees that I had in 2015. Frank, Crystal, Santiago, and Kita. Remember that name, Kita. Remember that face. He's going to come back later. It went great. It was a wonderful program. Through the Summer Youth Employment Program, the kids were able to get paid for their time. Through the generosity of the donors, I was able to get paid for my time. We went through a series of projects, starting with a flat surface, the same way I started when I was trained. Then we did these monograms, which you'll see more of, because that's always something I teach. And then we did the flower. Actually, this thing is this thing. I didn't realize it had been around my workspace so long. But then they did the flower. Then they did, okay, that's another flower. And it culminated in a sculpture in the round. I think this is an alien in a meditative pose, if I'm not, if I recall. Yeah, what an imagination. Where'd he come up with that? But in only 6 weeks, he went from doing a flat surface to doing a sculpture in the round. I was amazed. They were amazed. Everybody was amazed. So that gave me like, okay, we got to expand on this. And I've continued to do it ever since. And it's not just programs. I also visit craft fairs and demonstration. I take every chance I can get to demonstrate and expose kids to this, even young kids. I teach classes in my workspace, like weekly classes. There's another monogram. It's so helpful. It's a, complexity escalates little bit by bit. And in 2019, I raised a lot of money, my biggest fundraising achievement ever, and I raised money to do a 4-month program where 4 veterans, okay, so like why? Why veterans? I thought stone carving to me has always been very therapeutic. It's always helped me quiet my mind. It's helped me to deal with the craziness of life. And I know veterans, there's lots of people like losing their peaceful frame of mind, but veterans for sure, after having experienced violence and really extreme stuff as soldiers, they might really benefit from that. That was my thinking. I learned a lot from the program. I'm confident everybody who did it benefited. Here they are with their monograms. Yeah, Thomas, Jonathan, Carlos, and Paulette. Here's Thomas with his sculpture in the round. Okay, so that takes us to 2020. I'm still at it. I'm still doing the best I can to manage this nonprofit, but like I said, I don't know anything. I don't know what I'm doing. So after the mentorship of John Hicks, specifically, who was my fundraising fundamentals teacher, he says, you got to pursue partnerships. So this is my first instance of taking that advice and running with it. This is a program that we ran last summer. It's got some music and all, so I won't talk too much. These kids were serious. I was blown away. That's the flat surface. Flat surface is really challenging. obviously there's no design, there's no composition, there's no sculpture, but it's the challenge is learning how to use these tools precisely. Once you learn to use the tools precisely, it's like being able to drive. You just need directions and a destination. But first you got to learn to drive. This is the monogram. Mainly going to work with this corner. So the other corner is lifted up. Move it. I told you they were serious, all right? Very impressive. Okay, so now today, what's happening today, you're wondering? Good question. Today we have a collaboration with Mather High School. And believe it or not, that came partly as a weird rebound result of the Bundle Scholar program, because Maggie Barrows, one of the people involved with that program at Columbia, forwarded me a grant solicitation for grant proposals, and I said, well, this sounds great. I mean, you know, it was to partner with a neighborhood organization, and I thought, well, I'll partner with Stephen Mather because their craftsmanship is a big part of their curriculum. I didn't get the grant, but based on having formed a connection with them, they got some funding to do something, and they said, hey, let's get Chris involved. So today we have a weekly we have a weekly introductory session out on Governor's Island with 8 or 10 of their 11th or 12th graders. We start with the monogram. I set them up so they're not wasting a lot of time designing. And then they come in and they're like, wow, my initials, that starts things off like positive. And then they show up and it's like, you know, things really start cooking. It was hard to come up with a project that beginners could do in like 3.5 hours, because I can't even do anything in 3.5 hours. It's, you know, very impressive. But I help a lot. They work really hard, and they all get like, wow, I never worked so hard. But look at them. They're like, they really get into it. And again, I try to de-emphasize the product. I try not to have them think like you're gonna come away with something like that you're gonna want to put on the mantelpiece. It's more what you get out of it, what you take away like inside. And like, some letter combinations are tougher than others. That's really hard. Like she broke off the tip of her E, and she was like laughing. I was like, yes. Okay, feel free to get up and dance. So we bring them out in small groups for this introductory experience, and then kids do surveys, and we identify the ones who are like really into it. And when there's a vacation, like a week off from school, I don't know how they did it. They found funding so the kids can actually earn money coming back every day for a whole week. And this is the first week-long project we had where they made an arch. The blocks they started with, they didn't even have any flat surfaces on them. So that's a huge challenge, because you're marking pencil lines on a very weird, wacky surface. Creating this arch introduced them to the idea of starting with a two-dimensional drawing, and through the use of templates, squares, straight edges, translating that into a three-dimensional volume, which everybody put their pieces together to assemble into a real arch. is like the antithesis, yeah. It's the antithesis of sitting around scrolling on your phone, right? It's like total like energy and passion and productivity. Oh. Good question. Why are we at Governor's Island? Governor's Island is beautiful. That's one reason, but it's also because Mather High School was founded in a partnership with the National Park Service, you know, a branch of the federal government, because they have these old forts there that are like, you know, precious heritage. So they have space there, and they have room. This workspace is in the National Park Service building, and also the funding to pay me is coming from the National Park Service. So let's hear it for the National Park Service. Speaking of funding, we got a wonderful grant this year from an organization known as the Dora Foundation, whose purpose is to promote and preserve traditional crafts. And that grant enabled me to bring back Kita. Let's hear it for Kita. Kita, could you stand up, please? I feel so proud that I was able to share something with somebody that, 7 years later, still was in his mind, still had a desire to reconnect with that, and still really good at it. I mean, you know, not everybody like picks up the tools and is immediately comfortable. But Kita really blew me away, not only with his natural talent, but his willingness to embrace challenges. You know, I'd say, okay, we're going to try this today. And he'd be like, I don't know if I can do that. And I said, oh, no, just give it a try. And sure enough, he'd achieve it. So this is him in 2015 working on something like a comedy and tragedy mask. Thanks to the Dora Foundation, and he's able to continue bringing his skills to a higher level. Now he's doing some even more impressive stuff. And I can't wait to see, you know, what he does next. And the Dora Foundation is also helping me bring back another alumnus as an assistant. Kita assists me with the training on Governor's Island as well. Another alumnus named Ed is also going to be coming back soon. He's not here. He's on his way, but he's not here yet. So that brings us up to date. That's what's happening now. What's next? My vision is to have Kita and Ed be more teachers, as well as continuing to learn, but to have them also take over more and more of the teaching in the future. And then to have a group which is more skilled and more talented and more competent and able to take on commissions. And what kind of commissions? That's a good question. There are commissions right in the neighborhood. Right in this neighborhood, there are projects which cry out for the stone carver. I mean, at a local university, there's an unfinished pediment. You see, these stones were installed with the intention to be carved by McKim, Mead, and White. Never carved. I'm sure a lot of people don't even realize it, but imagine graduates of a local nonprofit on a scaffolding, adding their touch, adding in a sensitive way that's consistent with the local university's values. That would be fantastic. Havemeyer. There's also a chapel in that local university which has these, what they call these semicircular lunettes. On the other side, they never got around to carving that one. And you're probably familiar with the gateway to that nearby campus. Okay, yeah. On Broadway, they have these beautiful statues, but on Amsterdam, they have the pedestals, but no statues. PowerPoint lets me put in these little monsters. But there could be statues there.
Would your statue look like that?
No, PowerPoint didn't have what I would have done. So, well, that's basically, now you're not only up to date, you've seen the future. And if any of you are enthused and you're wondering, like, how can I see you actually doing this? I'd love to see a demonstration. We don't have the ability to do that today, but coming up soon at the Freemasons, I'm going to be doing a demonstration on 23rd Street at their Grand Lodge. You have to pay, but it'll be like with a piece of stone. I'll be standing in front of the stone, breaking it and telling stories at the same time. But if you don't have $40, you can go to 111th Street and see me do the same thing for free, as I did last summer when I just impromptu demonstrations and storytelling out in the street. If you care to be informed about these things, I have a pad where you can write your email address, and I'll keep you informed of when those things are scheduled. Yeah, so there you go. You can email me. You can go on the websites and see more information about all these things and videos. I try to update the Instagram when important things are happening, and Facebook. And on YouTube, I'm very proud that I'm doing how-to videos on YouTube. I'm showing how to carve stone. I'm showing the same projects that I teach the kids and that I teach in my classes. I teach so you could do it on your own. And I've connected with people around the world who've been following the videos. We traveled to England a year ago, and I actually met a guy who'd been, following my videos, and it was really fun.
Chris, if people wanted to come see you in Governor's Island to actually see kids working, could they come? Would you be open to having people come?
Sure, yeah. Wouldn't be a good time for me to have a conversation, but I think it would be great to have visitors, and yeah. 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 That is pretty much the end of, okay, here's ways you can get involved. You could volunteer. You can read it. I'm not going to narrate it. I'm getting tired. But I'm not too tired to answer some questions. And I timed this pretty well. We still have about 10 minutes.
That was amazing, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. We're asking people to use the mic so their questions can be recorded. Does anyone have any questions in the live audience? Otherwise, we can go to, I'll be right there.
It's always done by hand. Hand carving. You don't use any type of machines or drills or anything?
No, we use drills.
Because you just showed, how many times can someone pound a thing?
I mean, the greatest marvels in our culture were achieved that way. I'm not talking about New York, but like the Parthenon and the Colosseum and all. That's a lot of pounding, but I think beginners have a lot more trouble with it than once you. The kids who did the week-long program, they're like, I was so sore and tired after 2 days, but then it seemed to get easier. We do some drilling, though, because I don't see the point in For teaching, drill is the only power tool that we use. When I'm doing my own work, I use a pneumatic, which is like air compressor powered. They call it a pneumatic gun, but it's like a piston that the chisel it gets. There's a piston that vibrates, and you can.
My daughter-in-law in Chicago is into ceramics and wood, and she does a lot of this carving and stuff. But I think she uses some kind of tools rather than just hand tools.
A lot of people do. A lot of people do. They're easier to learn. They're easier to get the hang of. So my big metaphor for that is like stone carving is really hard. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of practice. And if you don't have a setting where there's other people who are beginners too, it's easy to feel like I must be bad at this. There must be something wrong with me. Because imagine if nobody played violin anymore, there were no teachers, and you picked up a violin and, you know, you'd heard what it's supposed to sound like, but you picked it up and tried, you'd be like, oh my God, this is horrible. There must be something wrong with me, because I see, you know, I hear them beautiful music, but I'm doing it wrong. But if you're supported by other people who are learning the same as you, you're like, oh no, it's not wrong, it's not me, it's just hard. And you practice, you're diligent, you have guidance, and it's fun all along the way. Even the beginning, when you're terrible at it, it's fun. You just have to do basic things to start off. The worst thing you can do is start off trying to do, you know, some kind of Baroque masterpiece. You start off with simple things.
Chris, will you speak about the role of humor in stone carving, not only modern day, but if you look at ancient stonework, often you see jokes and puns and events that otherwise the general public wouldn't understand. It's almost like a private language among stone carvers.
Well, I think I know what you're talking about. And there's not just humor. There's very weird stuff on these old buildings. No, I'm serious. There's something called Sheila na gig. And that's like a woman with her legs spread, and she's like spreading her vagina open. That's like a motif. It's not just one guy did it. It's like on churches, it's common. Not common, but it's you know, it's common enough to have a name. So I'm not a historian, though, and I couldn't really, maybe you could give a better answer to your own question. I love humor. I love it in, you know, settings like this. Oh, hey, this is a sculpture I made. I don't know if it's going to satisfy you. But my client, my patron, the person who commissioned me to make this, said, okay, we'd like a frog. So I thought to myself, well, a frog, that's a good starting point, but I need to find some way to make a frog exciting to me, you know? So like this idea occurred to me, like people riding a frog, because you can just imagine like what the folly of trying to ride a frog as soon as he takes off, like it's not going to end well. And I also heard like about how in some cultures the frog's a fertility symbol, so like to harness the frog is in a way to try to control our fertility. And I don't know about you, but like when I was younger, I definitely wanted not to have fertility. But then later on, when I wanted to be a parent, I definitely wanted fertility. So it's like harnessing something which is a natural thing. And now you wouldn't look at that and get all that, but like I got it. And that's probably part of what went into the artisans that you're thinking of, or the sculptors that you're thinking of, who created something with humor that maybe not everybody would get, maybe nobody would get, but you can tell there's something in it that's like a private joke. So I don't know. That's the best I can do. But I love humor, and I try to put it into my presentations and my art and life. Yeah.
Chris, where do you get all of your materials?
The stone?
Yeah.
Well, some of the stone is left over from the construction project at the Cathedral. I waited a good long time before I tapped into the blocks that had been cut for the tower, because it felt like, oh, I shouldn't do that. Somebody spent time on that. Right. But once I saw them being dumped, I said, well, it's better I turned it into something else than to have it go to the landfill.
Do you also work in marble?
I do, yeah. Marble's scary, though, because some marble is really good to carve, and some marble is like a nightmare. So if you don't have experience with the type of marble, you might end up not being able to pull off whatever it was you were trying to pull off. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's not really a question. I'll just comment because my husband and I are the proud owners of that frog, and we love frogs, and we have frogs on our property. So you know, we told Chris to make a frog, And then we talked about it. And then when he came up with this idea, I remember I think you showed me on the Columbia campus, we were walking around. And I was like, yeah, this is really cool. And then when he brought it out, what I love is like the man is just hanging on for dear life. You know, it does. And they look so intent, you know, so focused. And yeah, my husband here, we're very happy with our frog. So.
Emphasize this one here.
It's our
Not a joke.
And this is our second. Actually, we have a table too that Chris made us many, many years ago. So we love it. So.
And actually, there's a question from the audience about commissioning pieces. What preservation partners do you work with? Cemeteries, architects? You had mentioned, I saw the Jewish Museum, which is spectacular. That's a recreation of a 19th century building that had been demolished.
Yeah.
So are there regular partners in preservation or landmarks, or is it?
I wonder if the person who asked that wanted a plug for their company. Nicholson and Galloway. I worked for them for about 6 months on the facade of the Dakota on 72nd Street, yeah. Mm-hmm. But that's the only restoration partner I've had, yeah. Most of the things I do, almost all the things I do are new, not a replacement of something that was deteriorated, but something new. Hi, Arnaldo.
Hi, Chris. We were briefly touched a subject that interests me very much, and I think that certainly you carry on that, which is the idea of tradition. The idea that this craft is certainly very, very old, but the way that you're presenting it and approach with teaching is certainly very much alive. But with today's technology, how do you see the negotiation, or how do you feel about that negotiation of the process and the learning?
It's a special kind of tradition. It's not like a tradition like a religion, but in a sense, I think it's a special kind of tradition, because to me a tradition is something which is like older people pass it on to new people, and then those new people add to it and learn new things and pass it on to another generation. So it's like I was talking before about the attributes of humans. It's not just the hands and the brain, it's also the language to be able to explain something to somebody else. The machines that I showed you in the early part of the lecture, if it hasn't already done so, very soon it will replace the stone carver in terms of satisfying the needs for stone carving. So there's got to be something else. There's got to be another reason why we invest. And the future that I can see is if stone carving, blacksmithing, all these special crafts that are endangered, if they could be continued as an activity rather than as an occupation, as an activity. And when you think about what people do as an activity, which they have no expectation that they'll be able to make money off of. You were telling me your kids are going to go, and they're going to go to conservatory to learn music. Now, maybe they have a pretty good shot since they've made it to that level. But if you take your 10-year-old to a music lesson, are you doing it because you think they're going to become a professional concert, violin player or cellist? That would be, delusional. Or if you put them in the soccer team, are you thinking they're going to be, World Cup, they're going to be making a living off of it? I think not. The crafts could have a similar place in our culture as a way to enrich, life for young people and middle-aged and old people. It adds a lot to your life, even if you're not thinking it's going to become a way that you'll make a living. So that might be the path for the crafts, I hope. But I don't care. I'm just going to keep sharing it, demonstrating it, because if people don't even know, there's no way they're going to take it up if they don't even know it exists. Sure. Hi, Lisa.
Hi. I had a question. You had wonderful slides about everybody, the students working on their own letters, their initials, and then you had everybody doing pieces of an arch, presumably pre-outlined or pre-designed. Can you speak to their motivation? Why were they so motivated? It was impressive to see the high level of motivation, even though they weren't working to advance their own personal goal.
I mean, I could only speculate. They interviewed them. A teacher videoed them and asked them questions, but they didn't reveal that much. It was kind of like flat. I can tell you that, when I was in 6th or 7th grade, I had the opportunity to do like a shop thing once a week after school at the Cathedral school, and that was a highlight of my week. I just think there's something about working with materials and working with tools that's, it's got universal appeal. They were competitive. I could, like that girl who broke off a big piece and she was like, ah! They had been competing with each other for the biggest chip that they could break off. So there's like in a friendly way. It wasn't like nothing ugly about it. But plus they were getting paid. That helps.
What are some of the skills that thrive at the Stone Carvers Academy, and are there any health hazards?
What are some of the skills that thrive? Well, there's measuring, and that translates to so many different precision. Just the idea that if you're going to draw a line and mark a line on a piece of stone, you need to like get your face down close to it and really look at your measuring your implement and make that line as straight as you can. It sounds weird, but some people have never been exposed to that. Some people have never seen these tools, and most people have never seen these tools, but most people have never held them and tried to use them with intent, with purpose, to try to cut on this side of the line, but not on that side of the line. I don't know if that's the kind of information that helps you with that question.
Are there any health hazards?
Health hazards? No, there are none. You can hit your hand sometimes with a hammer, and it happens all the time, but it's not like sending people to the hospital. Even the chips, I have people wear protective eyewear, but even the chips that, can go in your eyes, it's more of a nuisance than something that would send you to a hospital. I get chips in my eyes all the time, and it's never been a problem. Just
You're not inhaling anything?
Oh, you're definitely inhaling dust. But it's not silica, it's not sandstone, it doesn't have highly unhealthy stuff. Yeah. Then there's air filters in the workspace that purify the air, and yeah.
We have a question from Maryland. Hi, Mr. Pellettieri. Thank you for sharing your craft. I live in Maryland, and I'm interested in carving and engraving headstones. How does one get training in this profession? And to get you started, I know we've talked about training programs at Woodlawn Cemetery. I think Greenwood also has a program. I think those are mostly youth-oriented programs, not necessarily an older person who might be designing their own headstone. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't really know of any programs to train people to make headstones because the headstone industry is dominated by very mechanized processes. If you ever have the opportunity to walk through an old cemetery, or maybe a mixed cemetery where there's old stones and new stones, you see like the modern stones, they've lost that handmade like flavor. They've lost that individuality and that character. There are people who make, including me, people who make handmade headstones, but I learned to do the inscription part at the cathedral. I practiced a lot on my own. The sculpture part was part of my training and part of my, personal self-training. But I don't know of an actual program where somebody could get that kind of experience. But I'm here, and if you want to come visit New York City, and I'll share what I know with you.
Or just come up to the upper lobby and have some cheese and refreshments with us. And
Yeah.
you could ask him. Well, this was terrific,
Yeah.
Chris. Thank you so much. It was a
Thank you.
real highlight of the series.
Thank you.
Great. And great to work with you.
Oh, we have, in addition to the pad to leave your email address for the mailing list, we also have these flyers that you can take away with basically the same information that was on the screen about the websites and the,
And the person who wants to learn carving should get your flyer because it has your YouTube channel and
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
watch it, if they live far away.
So sorry, Chris. Can I ask a quick question?
Saved, my student.
I won't even need that. I screamed. Thank you so much. It's one of the previous earlier slides where you have these vines, and then there's this piece of a face, and then leafy motifs coming out. Is it all from one piece?
Yeah.
Or her sculpture here, is it from one solid block?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
so
one
they're
solid
all
block.
from one solid block. There is
That's
no...
my passion, is to dig deep and make deep shadows,
Gotcha.
Henry Moore is okay, but he's not my cup of tea.
Gotcha.
I like a lot of richness and
Gotcha.
details. Yeah.
The one I was referring to, or some of your works where you go deep inside.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? I mean, just, maybe that's super skill, of course, and gift. But is it a special kind of tool that you go inside?
The pneumatic is very handy for that.
I see.
Yeah, and
Okay.
if you can drill a pilot hole with a drill, then you can expand that with the chisels
Gotcha.
and get in deeper.
And
Yeah.
extract things out. And so that was that single piece. What happens when accident happens in terms of a vital, delicate piece accidentally broke off? What do we do? What
Yeah.
do you do?
So, well, listen, if you want to hit the snacks, I'll answer this question. I don't want to slow you down. But that's a very common question. I think people have this,
What happens when something breaks off?
Yeah,
is the
yeah. People
question.
have this imagination like the Sphinx, like there's a guy carving the Sphinx in Egypt and he hit it wrong and the nose dropped off.
At a final stage, for instance, the frogs, and she's holding I don't know the terminology.
The reins, yeah.
The reins. And what if that broke
Yeah.
while you were still working?
There's basically like 3 possibilities. And I have a video, like, oops, I broke my stone. That's on the YouTube channel. There's 3 possibilities. You can go with it. You can say, okay, the stone is gone. I'm not going to try to repair it. No reins. The person's writing without reins, like, wahoo. Or you can say, I'm going to get some glue, and I'll glue that piece back on. In a way that's got less integrity, but, people do it all the time. People plan that. People say, I'm planning to glue stones together. So, it's not a sin. I said 3 ways, and I can't remember the third. I guess you could, you either redirect and come up with a different solution, or you glue it back on. Yeah.
Well, thank you again. And thank you all for coming.